We're off and running with a bit of news. The team signing former Redskins linebacker Zach Brown to a one-year, $3 million deal. Brown sending out this post on Instagram. The cream always look good on me. Hashtag Fly Eagles Fly. This should help ease some of the concerns about the linebacking position. And we are up and running now on this edition of Quick Slants presented by Nissan alongside Dave Zangaro. I'm Derek Gunn. Howie Roseman just never sleeps or never stops, does he?
He might not sleep either. It never ends. It's funny, after the draft, he told us we're not going on vacation. We're still working, and it turns out, yeah, they're still working. They always do this. They find talent later than other teams do, and it seems like even into the summer, they're going to still be looking for guys.
And they also just added another player that you were talking about.
Yeah, they claimed Blake Countess, a former draft pick in the 6th round of 2016. They liked him then. They let him get away. He became a role player with the Rams, and now he's back.
All right, let's take a closer look at the guy that we were talking about a moment ago in Zach Brown. Now, Brown was originally drafted by the Titans and started immediately as a rookie. He spent one season in Buffalo, that being in 2016, and made the Pro Bowl for the Bills, starting all 16 games and racking up 149 tackles. He was in Washington the last 2 years and started 12 games for the Skins last season. He racked up 96 tackles, a sack, and 2 forced fumbles. Dave, how much of a boost does this guy provide at linebacker?
Yeah, he's going to help them for sure. He's a tackling machine. You mentioned 96 last year, but since 2016, that was his Pro Bowl year. Those 3 years, he has 372 tackles. That's a lot. The only guy with more was Bobby Wagner, who's become a perennial All-Pro type of player. Now, he's not that good. Zach Brown's not to that level, but he's a pretty good player. I think he's not great in coverage, but he's going to be good as a tackler, as a run stopper. He has some speed. I think he's really going to help Nigel Bradham, because now Nigel Bradham can kind of focus on being what he needs to be, whereas this guy can come in, play inside a little bit. I still think Nigel Bradham is the linebacker who doesn't leave the field and who probably calls the plays with the headset, but this is a no-brainer signing. He's going to help them immediately.
Two things that we talked about yesterday on this show relating to this situation. You talked about how the Eagles don't seem to put a lot of value into that position, and I said basically they need a guy who can step up and be a thumper in the run game. Yeah. He can be that thumper, and he's not costing them a lot of money. It also tells me that the Eagles are still experimenting and exploring with the idea of how we can make that position stronger at a bargain basement price. I mean, when you consider what they have in the fold, you have a Paul Worrilow. He's coming off an ACL, but we don't know what he's really going to have. Sure. And L.J. Ford has been with 4 different teams in 6 years he's been in the league. B.J. Bello, special team type guy. Nathan Gary, he can give you a down here or there, but he's not a guy I really want to count on consistently. Kamu Grugier-Hill is a good player, but I don't think he's an every down player. I think he's another situational guy. And when you put them all together outside of Nigel Bradham, I think what we have here is a collection of guys, whoever makes the final 53-man roster, which we will talk about a little bit later in this show, at that particular position, they're going to be situational players depending on who they're playing, down and distance.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think right now it projects that Nigel Bradham, Zach Brown, and Kamu Grugier-Hill are your 3 starters. I expect to see the most of Nigel. He has to be their lead linebacker. They're going to miss Jordan Hicks. I mean, but he wasn't on the field consistently. At least Zach Brown, he was hurt a little bit last year with an oblique injury, but he played. He played through it, and you know he's going to be there. I think it's a really a sensible signing. It makes a lot of sense for what they needed. He's going to come in, and he's going to stop running backs right away, and in this division, that's a big deal when you're facing Saquon Barkley, Zeke Elliott, and the group that Washington's going to put out there, which should be a pretty decent group too.
And of course, Zach Brown and Lane Johnson have a little bit of history. Here's what I'm talking about. Brown actually got into it on Twitter with Lane before the 2017 season, saying basically, there are some new boys in town and we don't need PEDs to win, but just for you, number 53 will be seeing you. Now, we both know how Lane is, and he's not one to pull a punch. How do you think these two are going to mesh?
I think they're going to be okay. And I think that Lane would actually respect what Zach said back then, because he was defending his team. Lane came out and in a Players Tribune story said they were going to go down to Washington and whoop them.
Yep, that's what they did.
They did do it. It was 30-17 in that game. But if you're a Redskins player, you see that and you go, oh, I'm not standing for this. I got to take a shot back. And that seems like Zach Brown's personality. It's easy to squash a beef once you're on the same side.
And, of course, our colleague and my co-host on this show, Barrett Brooks, who's out on one of his many vacations, he's been talking about this guy for quite some time. On his Instagram account, he said, finally, got the linebacker that my man Barrett was clamoring for. Of course, he's on vacation, but still weighing on Instagram and seems pretty happy about it. Fast, explosive, instinctual, closest impact linebacker available. Really good pickup in free agency for the Eagles. Okay, I guess that.
Why you got to do him like that? Always on vacation.
Because if I wasn't here,
you take more vacations.
What are you talking about? What are you on his? Why are you always on his side? Don't I get the benefit of the doubt?
And see, he thinks this is a win for his linebacker group.
Yes.
It's not, because this is exactly what I expected the Eagles to do. They went out and they signed a guy for not a lot of money instead of drafting one in the first round, which was what he was clamoring for months. They found a bargain instead of spending that draft capital on this position. They found a way to do it on the cheap, which is what they were always going to do. They were never going to use a first-round pick on a linebacker. But I'm happy for Barrett. I know he's been, we should get him a cake when he comes back with a linebacker.
I'm not getting him anything. You would make a great politician, man. You play both sides very well.
I
just
do.
Want you to, man. All right, so now it seems the Eagles have plugged a hole in their defense, and as we look at the group on paper, it's pretty stacked. On the left side are your starters. On the right side, the backups, and there's depth at every level. The D-line should again be the key. Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Malik Jackson, Derek Barnett penciled in as the starters. Dave, man, how good can this group be, man?
Yeah, it should be good. And you have to remember, their defense wasn't the weak spot for a lot of last year. It was really the offense. So if this offense is better, it should help that group. You look at the secondary depth there. Those cornerbacks, last year, I've never seen anything like that with how many guys went down. Yeah. If they can stay healthy this year, it's actually kind of a blessing in disguise for this year that it happened last year, because you got to see some of those younger players. You got to kind of learn if they can be better players and can kind of become starters. And I think you have that now in guys like Avonte Maddox, Rasul Douglas. All those guys got a lot of experience. I think that'll help them this year. The one spot where they are still a little weak is that defensive end depth. They have two good starters in Derek Barnett and Brandon Graham. After that, it does drop off a little. Vinny Curry, a solid player. Then they're relying on Josh Sweat and Sharif Miller, two guys who are pretty unproven. So that's the one area where the depth isn't as great as I think it might need to be.
But when you look at the frontliners on the D-line in particular, I think it's a perfect blend, at least on paper right now, of stoutness in the middle and speed coming off the edge.
Yeah, well, they got Malik Jackson, which really helps inside. They got back Tim Jernigan. And inside pass rush is where it's at right now. That's kind of the trendy pass rush in this league. And Fletcher Cox is really one of the reasons for it. Guys like him and Aaron Donald, it's become a lot more important to get pass rush up the gut and not just on the edge. So the Eagles kind of, they started that in a way, and now they're going to keep doing it.
All right, Howie Roseman hoping to get his hands on another Lombardi trophy. It sure seems like the bulk of the offseason moves are done. So, Dave, as we look at the key guys that they've brought in, I want you to give me the offseason grade for Howie in the front office.
I was about to go solid A. I did give him an A-. Let me first say, I like a lot of what they did.
You're a tough grader, man.
I'm a tough grader, but you see all those guys, and the big ones, they keep Brandon Graham, they bring back Rodney McLeod and Ronald Darby, Tim Jernigan. They extend Jason Kelsey, which was a huge move in my mind. They bring Malik Jackson, Deshaun Jackson, Jordan Howard, Zach Brown, all really good moves, and I felt their draft was solid. The two areas where I think the only reason I gave them a little ding was because they let Michael Bennett go for basically nothing. And I understand that, but they didn't fill that as well as I think they needed to.
Right.
I didn't think they did enough to replace Michael Bennett. And then they let Steph Wisniewski walk. You know, maybe he comes back at a reduced cost, but if he doesn't, then they're pretty light at offensive guard, especially with Brandon Brooks coming back from a significant injury. So those two areas, that's the only reason for the minus, but altogether, pretty good draft and pretty good offseason.
Based on the company line, you can't keep everybody every year. I'm usually a pretty tough grader. I have to give him an A+.
A+?
I have to give him an A+. I mean, this was a team that you knew they were going to lose some personnel. We all thought Brandon Graham was gone. When they started the offseason, they were at the bottom of the barrel of cap space and free agency. Howie somehow, some way restructures deals and clears up a lot of cap space so he can bring back a Brandon Graham, so that he can bring in Malik Jackson. He can trade for Jordan Howard and Deshaun Jackson. And then, of course, he adds to it by getting the perfect complements, we think, on paper, the future left tackle for this team, quality depth at running back, we believe, in Miles Sanders, and another big wide receiving target, at least in the red zone, in J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. So when you look at all of the strategic moves that he made, and you look at the depth now, and of course he added another linebacker today in Zach Brown. So you look at the depth at every position, you look at the versatility at a lot of the positions, the key positions. I would arguably say they could have the best overall roster in the NFL in 2019, Dave.
Yeah, they have a really talented roster, you're right. I think the one part of it that you brought up was really important was the cap space. I think now we kind of take it for granted how good he is.
Yes.
But it does take some magic, and not every team is as good as this. We're kind of spoiled here in this city with what they've been able to do with cap space, but it is special. I mean, everyone thought they were finally in a tough situation when it came to that, and now they have over $20 million left after.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, so it is impressive what they're able to do in that area. And you're right, for the most part, everything looks like it's great on paper.
Yeah.
That's not where they play the games, though.
But did it help you raise your grade after you listen to what I was telling you? Did you raise your grade?
Oh, I wasn't listening.
Yeah.
Was I supposed to?
You know what, though? Success or failure is all predicated and revolves around one man.
You're right.
That franchise quarterback, whether you can keep him upright and breathing, that'll determine a lot in terms of how many games they could win or possibly lose, because now you don't have Nick Foles as a safety valve.
You're right. Well, at least they did what they needed to surround him with talent.
Absolutely. Do you want to live like a Super Bowl champion? Well, now you can own Nick Foles' house. His Haddonfield home now on the market for $799,000. Fairly modest home for the Super Bowl MVP. Of course, he just signed that $88 million contract with the Jaguars, so I'd imagine his house down there is going to look just a little bit different. But, Dave, is there any doubt in your mind that the next owner will be an Eagles fan?
Not a bad sell for the real estate agent to say the Super Bowl MVP lives here. I have an idea for him.
Yeah.
I think Nick Foles should put a treasure hunt and hide some signed jerseys or something around the house. But every room you go to has a new clue, and you have to keep following it until you find the. I mean, he's not going to do that, obviously, but he should. That'd be fun.
What would it be like if a Giants, Redskins, or a hated Cowboys fan bought that house, converted everything into that team's colors, and put it on the outside as well? A mailbox is a Giant or a Redskin or a Dallas. Can you imagine?
Yeah, an Eagles fan's got to step up and buy it.
You know, that mailbox is going to be down in less than 48 hours. Right now, the My Teams app, Dave Zangaro has his first projection for the Eagles' 53-man roster, including the addition of linebacker Zach Brown, who just signed today for a one-year, $3 million deal. So be sure to check that out. All right, Dave, so let's talk about your 53-man roster. Who's the biggest omission on your roster?
Well, for now in this version, it's Josh Adams, who was their leading rusher a year ago. Basically, we know the top three running backs. They're Jordan Howard, Miles Sanders, and Corey Clement. After that, it's a few guys battling for that last job. It's Wendell Smallwood, Josh Adams, Boston Scott, and you can even throw Donnell Pumphrey in there if you want to. And I understand that Josh Adams had a pretty good year for an undrafted guy last year, but I'm not counting Wendell Smallwood out. I'm done counting him out because I'm always wrong when I do it. Josh Adams is kind of between the tackles type guy. Wendell does more. And they have behind, through the tackles guys, and Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders. I don't think you need Josh Adams anymore.
See, I was gonna ask you why Josh Adams over Wendell.
I just told you.
Well, tell me again.
Well, the idea there is I think that Josh Adams is kind of redundant on the roster.
Okay.
But right now, I have to tell you, with the Blake Countess news getting claimed,
yes.
I will change this, actually. My biggest surprise is Andrew Sendejo. I don't think he's going to make the roster. That's my prediction. Yeah, because
Barrett said the same thing.
If he doesn't make he's already 31. If he doesn't make the roster, they save that compensatory pick that they would lose. And you look, I don't know if you're missing that much from Sendejo to Blake Countess, a guy the Eagles were really high on when they drafted him in 2016. So
Yep.
I think that would be another upset.
All right, when I looked at your 53-man projection, one thing that jumped out at me, you give it up on Shelton Gibson?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a possibility he makes the team as the sixth receiver, as a special teams guy. But based on what I saw last year, what's the one thing the offense needed last year? A deep threat, right? What's the one thing Shelton Gibson's supposed to be able to do? And he still couldn't get on the field.
Yeah,
So I just
yeah.
don't think that bodes well for him long term. And now they drafted another receiver who's going to make the roster because he's a second-round pick. And Mac Hollins is still ahead of Shelton Gibson because he's a really good special teams player in his own right and gives you a little more offensively. So I think he's probably gone.
All right, you and I just agreed a little while ago that this is a pretty solid roster on both sides of the football. What area, though, might they still address before it's all said and done?
Well, I think there are two. One is offensive guard that I mentioned earlier. I don't think they've done enough there. That's why a guy like Ryan Bates from Penn State, an undrafted kid, has a chance to make this team. And the other is defensive end, which I already mentioned too. I don't like the depth there. I think Vinny Curry's your top rotational guy.
Yeah.
And he's not one to get after the quarterback. And without Chris Long, without Michael Bennett, I think you're missing something in the pass rush. And I think that if there's not a lot out there, to be honest with you, but if they can find a way, maybe for a modest trade to get someone who's in a bad situation here, I think that would help.
All right, from what we both know of Howie Roseman, do you think he has done wheeling and dealing?
No. Howie's never done wheeling and dealing, and that includes training camp. If there's something that, remember the Ronald Darby trade a few
Absolutely.
years ago? I mean, he's never done. He's always looking for talent, and that's kind of one of the things that makes him so respected in this league is that he's always trying to find a way. And for the most part, they work out. You're not going to hit everything, but for the most part, he's made a lot of good moves in those types of deals.
The Eagles were out in full force last night to support the 76ers. Carson Wentz was among the bell ringers last night. Deshaun Jackson was going crazy sitting next to Allen Iverson. Zach Ertz looking pretty dapper in the hat. And then there was Alshon Jeffrey. He went to the Randall throwback sitting courtside. That's pretty cool to see how the teams in this city support one another. All right, Dave, the 76ers have someone ring the bell for each and every game. If you could handpick someone with the Eagles to ring the bell for Game 4, who would it be and why?
I'm going to pick the easy one here.
Yeah.
Imagine the smoke coming up, right? The smoke's coming up.
Yeah, man.
And then here he comes, crawling, crawling out of the tunnel.
You're talking about?
Weapon X.
Oh, my goodness.
It's the easy one. Everyone
He would bring the
goes
house down.
crazy.
Oh, my goodness.
Easy.
See, if it was me, I would think of someone like, let's say John Dornbos, a former Eagle. You know, him
Magic
being
Man?
the Magic Man himself. First of all, I want to see him make the bell levitate. And I would bring the house down. And then after that, that's just a warm-up. After that, I want to see him make the bell disappear from the floor and maybe reappear somewhere, like, oh, maybe the upper level or something like that. Can you imagine that? See, I want to see something cool like that.
What if he's like, what if the bell is on the floor and he's up in the top level and they show him and all of a sudden he's on the floor?
Oh, see, now you're thinking. Finally, I got you to think.
I'm with you on the Magic Man. I like that.
Oh, man, yeah, I can't wait to see who it's going to be. But maybe, just maybe, we may be off on this, Dave, because our own Seamus Clancy, basically, he asked the 76ers if he could wear the dog mask to the arena for game number 4, since the 76ers, and I can't believe this, the Sixers are the underdogs for game 4. Well, get this, the 76ers said, yes, please. So there you have it. So with that being said, I'm thinking Lane Johnson could be ringing the bell for game 4.
In the dog mask?
In the dog mask.
I get that. That's not a bad one.
Man.
They're kind of embracing that. It's funny.
Yes.
They are embracing that underdog theme that the Eagles did
2017.
quite a bit.
Are you starting to see that now? Everybody against the 76ers, everybody believing, we don't know how good they really are, and all they do is keep winning?
And Brett Brown is using it. No one thinks we can win.
Yeah.
Everyone's counting us out. It's the same thing Doug Peterson did that year. He really kind of hammered home on that, and it didn't work for Doug Peterson the next year when he tried to play that card again because, all right, you're the Super Bowl champs. You're not the underdogs anymore. But I see Brett Brown using that a little bit.
All right, as I said, the 76ers are going into game 4 as the underdog. You have a prediction for game 4?
I think it's a hard game. If they win it, series is over.
Yeah.
But I think you're going to get the Raptors' best shot on Sunday. It's going to be a tough game.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's imperative the 76ers go up 3-1 and don't go back to Toronto with this series even at 2 apiece, because then I don't like what could possibly happen in the series. I think the Sixers have the depth and the talent to win this series, but it'd be a whole lot more comforting if they're up by 2 games heading into game 5 instead of up series being at 2 apiece.
I agree with you.